a big question that we might ponder with both Trembling Before God and Alpert's article is why would Orthodox Jews not leave? And why not just convert to, say, Reform Judaism or something like that too? Um, and I think first of all, we see that these are people who are very, very committed to a certain interpretation of halakha, and they don't want to stop practicing that way. That all of that practice is really important to them. They just need this one part. And as Alpert really emphasizes, this sexuality is really only one part of any person. They just need that to be reshaped for them to have really important roles in the community. But Alpert digs in deeper and says, liberal Judaism is far more likely to be open to queer Jews, to be inclusive, and that the way that reform in particular gets there is by simply saying that something like that verse in Leviticus is just unimportant. It's unethical, and they won't keep it. But for people like Alpert, there's really an issue that um, she does not see liberal Judaism as actually resolving the problem. While she is able to say that currently there may be more space for queer Jews, what she wants to say is that the method of just not observing something that's in Torah is really problematic. On the one hand, it's problematic for thinking that the commandments are one whole piece and should be understood that way, but also ultimately what she's saying is if the treatment is basically addressing the symptoms and not addressing the system, that this is really going to ultimately fall apart. That for one thing, she notes that it's not as if women in reform or conservative communities have achieved total equality. It's not as if in sort of whether we're talking about religious society or sort of public society as a whole, it's not as if queer people or women, or especially queer women, have autonomy and equality and respect. So liberal Judaism didn't fix the problem, in other words, and actually, if it keeps pushing, if each symptom that's problematic is just excised and deleted, ultimately for Alpert, everything would have to be deleted then, because the problem is the system itself. It's not the particular verses, as powerful as they may be, but rather that all of the Torah needs to be kept but reread. And that's why for her, liberal Judaism is just really not a desirable alternative. I think the other thing to think about here is that religious Jews are often really not included in broader movements for homosexuality, right? That we see scenes in Trembling Before God where from Jews go to rallies where much of the talk might be centered on just saying that religion across the board is a problem, that it should just be thrown out, right? And that this is really a problem for people who find so much meaning in a relationship with God in keeping the commandments, and that to turn to secular movements for sexual equality is not a good plan, because queer Orthodox Jews are othered there too. They're treated as weird, really stupid, or even brainwashed for continuing to be committed to halakha. And so these other alternatives, whether it's liberal Judaism or some sort of broader secular movement for gay rights, that they don't address the real desire of Orthodox Jews who happen to be gay to remain Orthodox Jews, that's just not the focus of these other movements. They're not good alternatives.